What's happening, folks? Welcome back to Deckard Unicorn. My name is Martin.
And my name's Shonagh.
And if you haven't seen the film we're going to talk about this week, you deserve to be sent to the hell of the upside down sinners.
Absolutely.
So Shonagh, what's in your six demon bag?
At this point in 2020, hand sanitizer.
Well, I was kind of hoping for a kind of crystal laser thing that we could defeat a spiritual entity.
I think I think for this year's demons, this is definitely my secret weapon.
Yeah, so hand sanitizer is probably the best thing to have in your bag at this point. Okay, so if you haven't guessed from our cheesy intro, we're going to be doing Big Trouble in Little China this week, which is from 1986 and was directed by John Carpenter. Yes, the horror master again. It's the second time we've done a John Carpenter movie, but he's just so good. So yeah, film stars Kurt Russell, Kim Cattrall, Dennis Dunn, James Hong, and a bunch of other people, which we'll get to later.
You just listen to the old Pork Chop Express here now and take his advice on a dark and stormy night when the lightning's crashing and the thunder's rolling and the rain's coming down in sheets thick as lead.
So Shonagh, what do you think of Big Trouble in Little China?
I think it's great. Big Trouble in Little China, for me, is a kids' film for adults.
It certainly is. It's such a crazy mix of genres, which we're going to get into later. But yeah, it's just like the Wild West out there, literally. It's just like anything goes for John Carpenter in this. I mean, he's obviously got his Western influences, which are, quite obvious in a lot of his movies. But this film itself is like the Wild West. It's just like a new frontier. And
Absolutely.
There's just everything is on the table.
Yeah, there's a little bit of almost every genre you can think of in there, isn't there?
Yeah, so this was John Carpenter's 11th film, and it's just crazy how prolific the guy was in the 70s and early to mid 80s maybe, when he was still in the studio system. So he made all these films and they're all memorable.
They're all bangers.
They're all iconic. It's just nuts, Halloween, The Thing, A Big Trouble, obviously.
Prince of Darkness.
Prince of Darkness, the list goes on. They Live. These are all films that we obviously like to get to as well. Having done The Thing previously, if you've not checked that episode out, you should check it. It's in the archive. But yeah, he'd worked with Kurt Russell, obviously, before on Elvis and also on The Thing and Escape from New York. So this is a moment in time where those two guys really know each other inside out. They trust each other. And Kurt's got a lot of freedom in this one to actually sort of ad-lib a little bit as well. And you can kind of tell he's having just great fun on there.
Definitely. I think they really had a symbiotic relationship in the 80s and 90s, Big Kurt and John Carpenter. And I think they sort of egged each other on a little bit in some ways.
Yeah, they were just a perfect couple. Yeah, I found it interesting when Kurt Russell said that having known John for such a short period of time, they had developed this kind of shorthand between themselves where they just almost knew what each other was thinking. The sense of humour's obviously matched as well, and the sensibilities for what is going to work on screen, not just in a respect to what's funny, but also what works from an acting perspective, the kind of things that the character would do. They seem to be always on the same page.
Yeah, so it's a really good example of great chemistry between a director and an actor, and I think they both have a lot of mutual respect for each other as well, which is really nice.
But this film was not loved by the studio when it was released, or even before it was released. I think there was a screening for an executive and they really didn't like what they seen.
Yeah, and subsequently to that, the film was pretty much buried by the studio, which is a modern day tragedy. So the current understanding is that the studio weren't happy that the white American wasn't the hero of the film. They weren't happy and they didn't think that the film audience would appreciate that. So I think in many ways Carpenter was, ahead of the curve on a lot of things, particularly on that.
I think he was definitely ahead of the curve. He's usually got strong and central people of colour in a lot of his films. You look back to Assault on Precinct 13 as well, another classic. And the lead in that is a black character.
Yeah, I think especially at that time you would still have seen examples of people, particularly to play Asian characters, like having a white person dressed up in makeup, whereas in this film Carpenter went to a lot of effort to make sure that most of the actors in this film are actually Asian American or Asian. A lot of Chinese actors, Korean, Japanese actors.
Yeah, and he went to those communities in San Francisco and other places they were shooting, to get information. And they added a lot to the shoot, he says, like they gave information on mythology and obviously their martial arts. And yet I think it's kudos to him for actually using the people who would be best at that particular skill, As you said, it's easy in those times to just go to white actors and white stuntmen and have them dressed up, and even like, wearing facial prosthetics to make them look like they're Asian and stuff like that. But he was clearly a lover of martial arts cinema and Asian cinema, and he just wanted to bring that in an authentic way to this, to a Western audience. Because again, we only really had Enter the Dragon, which obviously hit massively in the West, but martial arts films were still kind of really on the outside. And this was his way of kind of using a big studio to bring something like that to the fore again. I think it's funny, there's maybe a few years before it, I can't remember the exact date, but you had The Big Brawl with Jackie Chan. That was one of Jackie Chan's first Western movies.
Now, it's funny you should mention Jackie Chan, because Jackie Chan was actually Carpenter's first choice to play Wang.
Yeah, that's right, he was, I just found out about that, and you think you picked it up in your research, which was magic. But yeah, Jackie Chan would have been amazing in this.
He would have.
I love Dennis Dunn. Dunn, I would never have changed Dennis Dunn. We'll get to the characters and everything, but I would never change Dennis Dunn. I think he's great in this. But yeah, it would have been so interesting to see Jackie Chan, because he basically fits the profile perfectly. He's got the action, he's got the action chops, but he's also got comedy action chops.
Exactly.
Which is kind of perfect for this film. And he's obviously, he can act as well. And he had English skill, which could sometimes be a barrier for people coming into the country, trying to get jobs, Asian actors or whatever. That was usually seen as a barrier. One
internet rumour that I did see was that the studio didn't want Jackie Chan in that role because they didn't feel that his English was good enough. So again, I don't know if that's true, but yeah, again, it's another example of a studio really interfering in a director's vision for a film.
Yeah. Like I said, Dennis Dunn probably fits it just perfectly.
Yeah, I think he's
because
great.
I think with Jackie Chan having that kind of comedy edge, that might have taken away from Kurt Russell's comedy edge, because Dennis Dunn is almost like the straight man in this.
Exactly.
And again, we'll talk more about that later, but yeah, it's an interesting aside that Jackie was even considered.
Following this, it was quite a while before Carpenter made a film with a studio. He was so jaded with the whole process. Oh, jaded. Sorry, that comes up in the film. Creamy jade.
Creamy jade, yes.
Oh, let's not cut that out, that's honking.
I'm leaving that in deliberately.
Oh, God. It was actually a while before Carpenter made another studio film. The two films he did after this, Prince of Darkness and They Live, were both made independently.
Yeah, both indies, yeah. Yeah, he just became so disillusioned with the studios, because they just interfered. And to him, they didn't really know what they were talking about.
Exactly.
He had his vision and they wanted a certain thing. Like you said earlier, they wanted the white hero to be strong and be the important one in the film and, come off better, because they felt like Kurt Russell just looked too much like an idiot. And it's funny because you see Kurt Russell's reaction to that was like, well, they got it. Like when we told him that they think he's an idiot,
Exactly.
It's like, well, that was exactly the point. But they clearly weren't expecting that. But again, this comes back to the idea of directors and artists like being ahead of the curve and going against the grain, and just studios not being ready for it. The money men, they want to see the thing that they know works.
Yep.
They don't want to see this kind of attempt at trying something new.
Yeah,
they think it's too risky. That's it. These people are risk averse because there's so much money and time and effort goes into it. And you can understand that to a degree, but when it impacts a vision of an artist like John Carpenter, you're kind of cutting your nose off to spite your face.
So as a result, the studio really didn't put any effort at all into advertising this film, and it was a box office flop.
Yeah.
But after its release on VHS, it's gained a cult following, and it's probably a favourite of lots of people that I know. It's a classic.
Especially people of a certain vintage, but
Vintage, is that what you call yourself?
Yeah, vintage. But it's a family friendly film. Anybody could watch this nowadays.
Yeah,
there's things that date it, but it still works. It definitely works. This is why we're talking about it, because it is still just as funny and good as I actually believe it's got better over time. I do as well. And so, confession time, I never saw this as a child or as a young adult. So Martin's looking at me like our relationship's over. The first time that I saw Big Trouble in Little China was when Martin introduced it to me. So that would have been like nearly 10 years ago. So I would have been in my mid-20s at that point. And although I was a little bit late to the party, I do think that
seeing it as an adult gave me a really good appreciation for it. If I'd seen it as a child, there's a lot of it that would have gone over my head that was a bit too subtle.
Yeah, I think that's also important. For me anyway, it's better that you see it as an adult and you still enjoy it. Because again, we talk about this a lot, about how it's easy to be cynical when you look at a film from the past and then you start to judge it on modern standards. So you're looking at it from a modern lens. And you're saying the effects are not good, the script's not good, you know, the actors are not as good as they are nowadays, the lighting's not as good, these kind of things. But for me, and I think for a lot of other people, these films are timeless, and a lot of those things don't really matter.
No.
You know, because they're a product of their time and you enjoy them as they were intended. It's really only the true cynics among us that are going to pick those holes in it and, you know, disparage the film for reasons like that.
Yeah, watch this film. If you've not seen it, we're going to ruin a lot of it for you. But if you've not seen it, watch it with an open heart.
Yeah.
Like, let yourself be a kid and enjoy it.
So that came out in 1986, and we checked this out yesterday, and what a year for movies it was. I couldn't believe the films that came out in the same time frame as this one. So you had Gung Ho, it was a Michael Keaton movie. It's kind of a little known, has some problems with race issues in it a little bit now. Maybe it's a little bit dated on that front. But you've got that. You've got Transformers the movie, one of my favourite animated movies. You've got Aliens, Labyrinth, The Colour of Money, Short Circuit, Cobra, Blue Velvet, Stand By Me, Ferris Bueller, Top Gun, Platoon. I mean, my God. This must be one of the best years in cinema history. Like, it's, for me anyway, there's a lot of my favourite films in there. It's unbelievable. Yeah, so one of the things that I truly love about this film is it is self-aware. You know, Carpenter was fully aware of what he was doing, what he was trying to achieve. It was goofy as hell, and he knew it. But I think the studio were looking for a more serious action adventure. They were looking for, I think he said they were looking for Indiana Jones. And Indiana Jones is not what they got.
Nope.
They got Jack Burton. They got good old Jack Burton.
On the Pork Chop Express.
On the Pork Chop Express. Yeah. It takes parts of the film seriously. You know, the Chinese mythological parts are taken very seriously and were well researched.
Yeah, and I think they're treated with respect.
They are, exactly. And obviously the martial arts part of it was treated with respect as well and treated very seriously. That's why he hired proper martial artists. He said he hired some masters to work with the actors and the stuntmen, and also to provide action for themselves. And you can see that in the work of Dennis Dunn in this, where he wasn't a martial artist, but he had some background, but he looks absolutely fantastic. He looks like he's been doing it all his life. And you can only get that when you've actually got professionals in that art form teaching those people. That's the only way they're going to be able to do it quickly and make it look effective. So we'll get to our favourite moments in the film later on, but just on the topic of being self-aware, there's a couple of moments in the film where the characters speak as though they're from the audience's perspective, you know, when things don't go particularly well, and they're just kind of like asking themselves, like, how the hell has this happened? What am I doing here? We laughed yesterday about the moment where they go into the Wing Kong exchange with the phone. It's
brilliant. It's so funny.
Yeah, they go in. He's just waving a telephone at them, saying he's from the phone company, and they go inside.
But when Martin says waving a telephone, literally one of those old like ones where you had to like dial round, and he's literally just got it in his hand, and he's like, "I'm from the phone company." It's like confidence trickster at its best.
It's just as he gets inside, you know, the first thing he says is, "I can't believe they fell for that," because that's exactly what you as an audience member are saying. Like, what is going on with these two guards? Like, why did they fall for that?
It's so funny.
And then later on in that moment where they're in the secret elevator, and Wang says, "Do you think we could just waltz in and out of here like the wind?" And Jack was like, "Yeah, I thought that was your whole plan." So yeah, there's moments like that in the script where it's like they understand the goofiness and the silliness of it, but the actors play it perfectly against that backdrop, and yeah, it works so well.
And yeah, the actors really allowed themselves to be kind of made fun of, you know, like they really embraced the silliness, and Kurt Russell obviously embraced the fact that he was the sidekick. Yeah,
well, that's exactly it. I'm going to get to that as well, but he is actually the sidekick in this film. But before we get to that, we just have to talk about the blend of genres in this
all
film.
Of the genres.
All
the
of
blender
the genres.
of genres.
Like we talked about it at the beginning, but it's kind of described as, you know, martial arts movie,
Western.
It's almost Western, like film noir kind of elements in there as well, you know, action, adventure, mystery.
Kind of rom-com.
Ghost story.
It's everything.
It's just insane.
It's big.
Like, he honestly just It's almost like he threw loads of genres into a tumble dryer or something. Again, it just works.
Yeah.
The way it's set up at the beginning, you've got that part in the office. And again, that's got a kind of noirish vibe, where Egg Shen is talking to the lawyer. And they're trying to get their case straight about what happened with Jack Burton and all these kind of things. And he's telling them to leave him alone. And it's got this quite a serious setup. And Carpenter had said that he wanted to start off with reality and show people reality, and then gradually just descend into fantasy and madness almost. Pure chaos, yeah. I love the way it's set up. And funnily enough, that opening scene was something that the studio wanted to be added.
Yeah, the studio felt that it needed Jack Burton kind of bigged up a little bit more. They obviously still weren't getting that. Yeah. So they put in this scene at the start to kind of set you up as being like, to set Jack up as the hero of the story from the outset.
It's almost like the Ghost Story opening. The Ghost Story is usually like the kind of old wizened man that knows what happened, and they're kind of like, again, like The Fog, where they sit around the campfire and you get the old man telling the kids the story. And I feel like that's where Egg Shen's position is in this. Like he's seen it and done it, and he's letting folk know just what happened, and it's like, sit back and relax, I've got a story to tell kind of thing. So, and exactly, shows that little bit of magic. I love it. I love how he actually mirrors the lawyer's hands. The lawyer's like, show me, lift his hands sort of spread apart, and then Egg does the same thing, but the lightning crackles across his fingers. It's just really well done. But clearly the biggest influence is like, Chinese kung fu movies, Chinese opera maybe, that kind of thing. Ghost stories. You can see a little bit of influence from stuff like Close Encounters of the Spooky Kind, the Sammo Hung movie from the 80s. Mr. Vampire, even though there's no vampires in this, it's got that kind of flavour to it, that Chinese mythology, ghosts and demons and all these kind of things. But I love also the influence of the Japanese samurai movies. I think the Baby Cart movies have got a big influence, especially on the character design of the Three Storms. Definitely. So the Three Storms are my favourite thing about this. I just think that design is fantastic. There's a samurai movie called Baby Cart at the River Styx, and it's a Tomisaburo Wakayama, and he's like a kind of lone samurai warrior who walks around with his kid in a pram, a baby cart. His name is Ogami Ito, and the son's name is Daigoro, and they just get into adventures. But in Baby Cart at the River Styx, they fight the three Hidari brothers, and the Hidari brothers look exactly like the Storms. Even though the Storms are actually based on actual Chinese mythological demons or characters. But yeah, that filmic character design is definitely from the Hidari brothers. I think you could see Carpenter's influence there. But yeah, certainly this is a love letter to Asian cinema, Chinese cinema and Japanese cinema in general, I think. Carpenter clearly has a massive amount of love for it. And
a lot of respect. And we mentioned earlier that one of the other great things about this film is it really subverts the traditional hero archetype.
Yeah, absolutely.
So quite often sort of adventure films at that time, you would have a white hero with some kind of sidekick, some kind of minority sidekick. But the white person was always the one that was knowledgeable and would always get their sidekick out of scrapes and things like that.
Yeah.
Whereas this film, although Jack Burton's very clearly the protagonist, he's not the hero.
No, absolutely he's not the hero. Dennis Dunn is the one that gets him out of trouble constantly. He's always getting himself in trouble. Big trouble in Little China.
And so Jack Burton's character, he's constantly making mistakes, he's constantly sort of bumbling about a little bit, whereas Wang very rarely puts a foot wrong.
No, he doesn't.
He's very competent, he's smart. He's the definite hero of this story.
He's in control and he's physical. It's exactly what they were going for. Again, we talked about John Carpenter and Kurt Russell having this kind of sixth sense where they just knew what was going to work, what was going to be funny or whatever. And at first they had sort of this idea that he would be like John Wayne, but it's John Wayne if it went wrong. So it was John Wayne when he thought the director wasn't looking, who was making all the mistakes and didn't know where he was and was wondering why he was here, and
Jack Burton thinks he's the hero of this film, right? He's so self-confident, he's so self-assured. His one-liners are like, they crack me up so much even just thinking about it. So he thinks he's the hero, he thinks he's in control, but actually he would be absolutely lost without Wang.
He would 100% lost without Wang. He's in a place that he has no real knowledge of. He's completely out his depth. And, Wang is his guide, but also his protector.
Yeah.
And they're really clever with how they frame it towards the end, where Jack doesn't really do anything. He's just kind of there.
He's like knocked out for like one of the big fight sequences.
But it happens all the way through the film. Like, whenever there's a massive battle, he does maybe one or two small things, and then somehow ends up out of it.
But it's done in the timing of it is so funny.
Okay, so moving on to characters, we've just been talking about Jack for quite a bit. So yeah, as we said, Jack is the supposed hero of the story, but clearly he's not. And he just kind of bumbles his way through the whole film, doesn't he? Like he just moves from one disaster to the next. But there is points where he is in control. There is points where he does seem like he knows what he's doing. But I love Kurt Russell's acting, and there's a lot of points where it's very, very subtle. Where he's saying, "I've got this in hand. It's in control." And then he'll turn away and his face drops like, oh my God.
Yeah.
It's a look to say shit.
And it's really, really funny. And his timing is really good.
Yeah, but his timing is great. Like his comedic timing is absolutely spot on.
It is.
Kurt Russell just has never been this ultra serious hero type. Even when he played Snake Plissken in Escape from New York, there was always a kind of wink. There's always like this kind of sarcasm just under the surface. Yeah, you take him seriously as a person, but there's always just this aspect to his character where it's just like, he can sling a joke, he can sling a bit of sarcasm your way. And obviously in this film, he's more cartoonish.
Yeah, definitely.
Like he's drawn a bit bigger, and he just allows his natural funniness, I think, Kurt Russell's natural funniness to sort of shine.
Yes, he's like a cartoon of John Wayne in it.
I love the fact that they turned that archetype upside down. It was a brave move by John Carpenter, and a progressive move as well.
Definitely.
Nowadays, like studios would jump on that like that's great, that's exactly what we need, because there needs to be more diversity in storytelling and stuff, and that's the kind of thing that would really sell well these days.
So we do have a bit of a damsel in distress in this. So Wang's girlfriend who gets captured, but we also have, enter stage left, Kim Cattrall.
Yeah, we do. That's right, Kim Cattrall, and she was Gracie Law.
Gracie Law.
And
she's fabulous in this. So I always thought, putting Mannequin aside, I always thought that I didn't like Kim Cattrall.
Right, I see.
But I think it's because I don't want to say grew up watching, that I was aware of her more in her role in Sex and the City.
Right,
and
okay.
I really didn't like her character.
Yeah,
or actually that whole show just generally. So I think that put me off. But I love her in this film.
Yeah, again, she's really funny.
Yeah, she's
really
totally
funny,
hamming it up, don't get me wrong. But, intentionally.
Yeah, exactly. And she is, like you said, she's not exactly a damsel in distress in this. There's moments where she does have to be bailed out a little bit because she's so eager.
She's headstrong.
She's headstrong and she's eager and she wants to get involved in the action. That's kind of the point. She is a strong, feisty female character.
Yeah, like she's introduced to us in this film as someone who is looking to protect potential victims of sex trafficking. Like
exactly.
That is that's a bold move.
Obviously, this is where she meets Jack and things take a turn maybe for the worse. But yeah, like we said, there is times when she gets bailed out, but I think it's funny that both her and Jack are in exactly the same position. She's as much of a damsel in distress as he is.
Exactly.
Because he's constantly getting in over his head and then getting bailed out because he's eager to help, but he doesn't really know what he's doing, in some situations. And she seems more knowledgeable. She's definitely got the brains, but there's points where she does need some help, like maybe physically or whatever, when she doesn't have the physical tools to deal with certain things. So
another interesting thing that I found out about Kim Cattrall, who's, by the way, has the same birthday as me, 21st of August.
You're kidding.
Actual twins from different eras. But Kim, we're besties now. Yeah. So Kim Cattrall was also a big theatre actor, and throughout the filming of this, she was actually performing in Chekhov's Three Sisters.
What?
So she used to leave the set at 4:30 every day to go off and perform in the theatre. And amazing. She's actually quoted somewhere as saying that she took part in films to subsidise her theatre career. And I just think that's lovely, and I feel bad that I judged her based on a character in Sex and the City.
The thing is, Sex and the City character, you disliked her, so she probably did.
Yeah, she did a really good job of playing that character. Yeah, I feel bad. And I'm also going to have to go back and watch Mannequin again because I absolutely love that.
And Police Academy.
Oh, and Police Academy. I forgot she was in that.
Yeah.
Oh, Kim, if you're listening. I'm joking.
She's quite funny in that as well. But yeah, they've actually got a really good relationship, and I like the fact that it ends on a kind of a down note, or you don't really know where they're going to go with it.
Yeah.
You know, because they clearly would have issues as a couple. You know,
Yep.
during the time of the film, they know they need each other at certain points, and it seemed like a good fit. But I think away from that,
Yeah,
and I
they're
think
not
Jack,
a good match.
Yeah, I think Jack makes a good decision towards the end, and again, subverting expectations.
Yes.
You know, the hero doesn't kiss the girl and walks away, and again, the characters are aware of this. They actually make that comment, "Oh, you're not even going to kiss her," and he's just like, "Nope," and just walks away.
Yeah.
You know, and she accepts it again because I think she knows deep down that's not going to work either.
No.
She even says that as much just before that. So I think that's really cool.
And she offers to move into his truck at one point.
Yeah, that's never going to work.
No.
Don't get between a man and his truck.
Absolutely. And the truck makes quite a lot of appearance in the film as well. Like
It does.
like his rig, the
Yeah.
Pork Chop Express.
Oh my god, I need a Lego. I need a Lego Pork Chop
Yep,
Express.
Lego,
Please, Lego.
if you're listening, Pork Chop Express, please.
Yes,
But I think the rig as well, this big, giant, physically imposing vehicle, is probably quite a good metaphor for Jack in this story. You know, there's that scene quite near the start where he drives it down the alleyway in pursuit of the kidnapped girls, and it's this tiny little alleyway and this giant truck that he's just ramming in where it doesn't belong. And
Yeah,
I kind
exactly.
of feel like that is him in this film, this big clumsy guy ramming himself in where he's got no clue.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's a good wee metaphor for him.
Yeah, so we've touched on Dennis Dunn a little bit earlier, but yeah, I just want to say again about how really good he looks as a martial artist in
looks
that,
brilliant.
and an action star, and you know, it's just a fabulous performance all the way around.
I felt his acting in this was really clean.
Yeah, it
really
was.
polished.
It was.
And this is really Wang's story, you know. This is the story of Wang's fiance coming over from China, and then she's kidnapped at the airport, and then he has to go and rescue her. So, you know, he gets his happy ending.
Yeah, exactly. And as you said, it's almost like Jack just kind of inserts himself in that
Yeah.
story.
Rams himself in there.
Rams himself in there. But yeah, he's a really talented actor, Dennis Dunn, I think, and the fact that he was able to add that string to his bow, the martial arts part, you know, is just like more kudos to him. I think he worked with Carpenter again in Prince of Darkness. He was like a scientist in that, so
Okay.
he's really good in
yeah.
that as well. He did a fantastic performance in this. I love what he did.
And Dennis Dunn is quoted as saying as well that when he took this role, he'd never seen this type of role available for an Asian American actor. You know,
Yeah.
he was really drawn to that and that opportunity. So I think that's
That's another mark against John Carpenter. Another one in the win column for him with this one. Progressive and doing things that studios weren't doing at that time that they should have been doing more of. Okay, so the big bad in this is David Lopan, played by James Hong. And he's got a few forms in this, obviously, because he is a kind of ethereal, ghosty being type deal, you know.
So he's cursed. If you haven't seen the film,
Yeah.
he's got a curse on him. So he's been like living in this cursed state for like 2,000 years or something
Yeah.
like that. And to break the curse, he has to marry a woman with green eyes,
And then kill her.
and then kill her, which is a bit ox.
Totes ox.
to break the curse and become mortal again.
Yeah.
And in this film, he manages to get 2 girls with green eyes.
That's right,
but-
exactly. So best of both worlds, as
Absolutely.
he says.
So he can marry one and
Kill the
or
other.
marry 2 and kill one of them.
I think that's one of these modern games, isn't it? F, marry, kill.
Oh God.
Isn't it? Well,
But
he's got 2.
He's such a good baddie.
Oh, he's great. James Hong's got like a massive body of work. You know, the guy's been in, God, how many films? Hundreds. Like the thing is, he doesn't have a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
Is it not?
No, he doesn't. I think you have to pay for it.
Do you?
But I don't think James Hong's short of a couple of bob. But I don't know. I mean, you'd think somebody would put like a Kickstarter together or whatever just to get him a star. Because he's getting
What
on.
age is he now?
He's an
He
older
must
guy. I
be,
mean, he must be in his late 80s. But
Yeah.
it's just amazing that someone like that, who's again so prolific, like done so many films, and he doesn't have a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
Oh, that makes me sad.
Yeah, it's quite sad.
But yeah, he plays such a good baddie, and the actual like character is so well known.
I love the contrasting character design between the 8-foot tall roadblock as,
Yeah,
as
with
Jack
like
calls
the
him.
laser beam eyes and the,
Yeah, that's a fantastic character design. I don't know which Chinese dynasty it's based on, but yeah, it's clearly one of the kind of Chinese dynastic families. You know, you've got the kind of the long coat and everything, and the sort of headdress.
When I think of Big Trouble in Little China, this scene, that's what pops to my mind is Jack Burton, you know, driving over him in the alley, and then him appearing with the laser eyes and the laser mouth. Yeah. It's great.
He's
gold.
And when you see him as the kind of decrepit old man in the wheelchair as well, it's just so funny. Like,
and it's like this wee old creepy guy.
And you can almost, like, his head's almost translucent. You can kind of see through.
Like, the makeup's actually quite good considering, like...
Yeah, the makeup's brilliant.
Like,
I really like it.
We watched it, was it HD we watched it in?
Yeah, we watched it in HD.
And it's, like, you know, it doesn't look terrible considering...
No. I mean, they're the kind of things that you would get away with on VHS, you know, when it doesn't have the resolution to show up. But yeah, even in Blu-ray, that remaster we've got is really good. And the makeup looks great overall, I think. We'll get to that later about the technical effects and stuff. But James Hong is legendary in this, just so good. And he's flanked by his sort of 3 bodyguards, the Storms. We touched on them earlier about how their character designs are like based off the Hidari brothers from the Baby Cart movie. But this is my favourite aspect of this movie. It's the thing that captured my imagination when I was a kid. You know, these guys that could control elements of the weather. You know, you've got thunder, rain and lightning. And obviously we know that lightning has since become Lord Raiden in the Mortal Kombat games.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the guy, Ed Boon, the guy that created Mortal Kombat, is like very open about his influences. You know, for example, like Johnny Cage is based on Jean-Claude Van Damme, you know, and Liu Kang is a kind of Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan sort of combination. But yeah, Lord Raiden was, you know, lightning in Big Trouble in Little China. And those 3 guys are just fantastic.
They are.
And you've got Carter Wong as the head of the group. You know, and he's Thunder. He's the one that's able to expand his body and explode.
As my dad would say, he's built like a brick shithouse.
Yeah, he certainly is. Yeah, he's reminds me of Bolo Yeung, the guy who was in Enter the Dragon and a bunch of other films. He was a power lifter and had a huge chest and neck.
And like, yeah, the traps of a giant.
He has the traps of a giant, yeah. So, yeah, Carter's pretty heavily built. But he was like a major Chinese action star for a long time. I mean, you look at his filmography, it's just ridiculous. He's got about 50 or 60 films before we get to this. And this is maybe his first, possibly. It might be his first or his second appearance in an American film. But he went on to be in Hard Case and Fist. I remember that. He had a part in that. And then we have Peter Kwong, who's Rain, the guy with the long hair and the swords. Like, he was super cool. I don't know, he was maybe the one that stood out to me when I was younger as well. I think because he was so diligent with those swords, like the 2 weapons. But yeah, he's another one with a great look. He's the one that Kurt Russell lifts the hat up and punches him.
It's brilliant.
Punches him in the face at point blank range twice. Then decides like, shit. And he gets drop kicked into a chair. Yeah, I think that's so good. But yeah, Peter Kwong was Rain. And it was James Pax that rounded out the Storms, and he was Lightning. And again, he became Lord Raiden, obviously, in Mortal Kombat. I like the way he spins it looks like forks.
I know, it's really it's got these long barbecue forks.
Long barbecue forks, yeah.
I don't really know what those do as weapons.
Yeah, but. Well, they spin and they look dangerous, so I think that's enough. He just needs to stand next to you, you know. Like, but yeah, the 3 Storms were just fabulous. Brilliant character design, and they're just like always on the cusp of things.
Their entries are so dramatic. It's like pantomime. It's so
that's
good.
It. And again, because of the influence of Chinese opera movies, you know, that's like this very explosive, big, bold, brash opening where they just appear and they show what they're all about, you know, a little bit of a move, a demonstration of their skill. I just love it. And that moment when you see the fight in the alley, we'll talk again about the kind of specifics later, but the fight in the alley where they first appear, and then you've got that kind of running camera shot where they go around, Jack gets blinded, he gets the water thrown in his face, and it's all just one take.
It's nuts.
And they go into and you see that there's just carnage where these guys have been.
Yeah, there's so much skill hidden in this film that you just don't realise.
Yeah, it's so good.
And while we're on the baddies, there's also some female fighting baddies in it as well who kick the boys' butts, which is really nice as well. I don't think I'd seen that in a movie from that kind of era before as well. So
again, that was a staple of Chinese action movies, like Chinese kung fu movies. You know, if you even take something like that came to the West, like Enter the Dragon, you've got Angela Mao,
who
you see in that, and she's fighting off guys, no problem. You know, obviously she succumbs to Ohara at one point in it, but yeah, that's just a staple. You know, like women were fighting kung fu fighting in Chinese films for a long time.
And again, it wasn't like oh look, here come the girls. It was just,
it's just like, as a matter of course, it's just they're here, they're warriors, they're going to fight just alongside the guys, they're going to fight guys, it doesn't matter, that's just, they're there to protect or do their job. Just before we move on, I think it's also good to mention that John Carpenter had said the relationship between Wang and Jack was kind of like Butch and Sundance, which I thought was quite interesting. And I just love how those two actors and the two characters are so in tune with each other. Yeah. Like, they're so in tune with each other's emotions. There's a moment where they talk about how we're just old friends getting back together and talking and stuff. And Jack can tell that there's something up with Wang, that he's not quite right. I love that character interaction they've got.
And actually, even at the end, sorry, spoiler, Jack brushes off Kim Cattrall, and there's no big kiss at the end, but the big goodbye romantic scene is between the two boys.
It's a bromance.
It's a bromance.
Yeah. And also, I'd just like to maybe touch on a little bit about Jack's philosophical musings. We talked about Jack earlier, but it's the patter is absolutely fabulous.
It's brilliant.
He's basically speaking into the void. He's just on his walkie-talkie, talking to maybe other truckers or whoever else has got a CB radio to tune in.
I like to think no one's listening. Like, it's just him on the road.
And he's got these pearls of wisdom that he keeps throwing out there. I think the script in this film is just so good.
Yeah, it's
The
brilliant.
dialogue is so witty and quick. But another character we'd just like to touch on is Egg Shen.
Yeah, he's like Gandalf in this, right?
He is like Gandalf in this. Yeah, he's like the great wizard. And only really comes out towards the end. And I just love the fact that this is his destiny. Yep. Egg has been training for this moment for so long, and he finally gets the chance to banish the demon, and he's got the team around him that he knows can accomplish it. I love...
he's been gathering all the right artefacts in the Ghostbusters firehouse for all these years.
That's right, yeah, exactly. Egg Shen's place is actually the Ghostbusters firehouse, that Hook and Ladder 8, is it? And I love how he's also got a Magnum.
I know.
He brings a Magnum out, and obviously Dirty Harry was a San Francisco cop, and they're from San Francisco, so that was quite a nice wee nod to Mr. Harry Callahan.
But Egg is the one that gives our heroes the magical potion towards the end that gives them the power. And that's great as well because, they're doing all this crazy fighting and, you could be like, oh, how come they're so good at fighting all of a sudden? But, he's given them that a magical potion. That's
a great character moment. It's a nice wee piece of writing to sort of explain how these 6 guys at the end, essentially, can go there and defeat almost like an entire army and a wizard.
With mystical powers.
And you've also got the storms, and you've also got the kind of monster that appears. So there's a lot of things to sort of defeat, and having Egg giving them this magic potion is just the best. That scene in the elevator where they go down is just
it's the best scene in the world.
It is absolutely hilarious. Every time I watch it, I'm just almost in tears laughing.
Like when you look at a new person's face in the elevator and you just see this, it's brilliant.
They're all on the cusp of laughing as well, like they're just going down, and Jack's like, feel good,
feel great, feel invincible.
Kind of invincible. And then all just start smiling and looking at each other,
and then they're like tapping each other on the shoulder. And
it's the way that guy just finally he just lays his hand on Egg's shoulder, and Jack's like, is it getting warm in here? It's just me. And takes this awkward turn at the end. It's just
it's one of those scenes that you have to rewind 3 times and watch again before you can move on.
It's the best.
There are going to be some of you out there who are not going to find it funny at all.
No,
and
probably
I'm
not.
Sorry for you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's so funny. Victor Wong is just great in this, Egg Shen. And he's at the heart of everything that's good about the last third of the movie. So let's move on to some of the technical aspects. I mean, the first thing you wanted to talk about was the costumes, didn't you? April Ferry did an amazing job with the costumes.
Yeah, I think the costumes are great. You spoke earlier about the storms. That look is awesome.
Yeah, and it took them a while to get the bamboo right so that the martial artists could actually move, because that'd be quite difficult, to have bamboo almost like a corset.
And yes, the costumes that the girls wear are beautiful. Visually, I think it's a really nice film to look at. There's a lot going on.
Costumes help, and obviously the sets and decoration and stuff like that is just classic Carpenter.
The sets are fantastic. My favourite is the sort of temple of doom, I guess, where
with the escalator,
the escalator of doom, where they're at the wedding ceremony is happening at the end, and you've got these ancient looking statues that are highlighted with neon strip lights, and I just think it looks fantastic. It's the most freaking 80s thing you'll ever see.
It really is.
But it's so cool.
The neon lighting just kind of reminds me of like Blade Runner again. You know, we've got this idea that noodle cafes and, you know, Chinese takeaways and all these kind of things, they've normally got these blazing neon signs outside to try and invite you in. And they use that aesthetic and they mix it with the kind of mythological figures, you know, like the big skulls and all that stuff, and they wrap it in it. And it's just, that is really clever set design. It looks fantastic. And you've got that set as well. They built on the back lot where they have that first fight. You talked about it earlier where the truck comes in. Yep. The truck was just barely big enough to get in there.
I would not want to have been doing the driving in that.
But that set was amazing. I think they said it was based on China from the turn of the century, but also you've got a kind of contemporary San Francisco sheen on top of it, wee bits and pieces here and there. So it's a cool mix. I really like it. It feels realistic. Yeah. It doesn't really look like a set, honestly.
No, it doesn't.
It does feel
like
a back
pavements and stuff look really. They look.
But again, that comes down to the dressing. You know, they're dressed really well. You know, they've got rain and stuff on the ground, and it doesn't really look like a set. It looks like a real place.
And apparently, it was used after this film by Michael Jackson in one of his music videos.
That's right. Yeah.
So apparently, he was visiting on set during this to scope out the location, I guess.
And the story itself, I think it was written by, I don't know if it was script treatment by W.D. Richter. I think he did Buckaroo Banzai and a bunch of other films.
That explains a lot.
Which is absolutely bananas. And again, that might explain why there was so many, like, the clash of genres and just so weird, but it still works.
Yep.
You know, he's a very talented writer. I think John Carpenter had said that he just loved working with him because it was just so off the wall, out of the box, you know, let's just go with that, you know. And then obviously you've got the ad-libbing, you're giving a bit of freedom to the actors like Kurt Russell and so on, you know, just to sort of do their thing. And we talked a little bit about the kind of Western theme, you know, that there's an idea that this is the figure comes into town, you know, to sort out the trouble. Obviously Jack is not the John Wayne that he thinks he is, but I think it's reflected in his get-up. You know, he's got that long duster coat, and he also carries like a saddlebag with him.
Over his
especially
shoulder.
At the end over his shoulder, you know. And you could always argue that the truck is like an iron horse type of thing.
Well, apparently, originally it was written as a Western.
That's right, yeah, exactly.
And Carpenter turned it down in that sort of state, but then when it was rewritten for sort of modern times, he absolutely loved it.
Yeah, I think it was supposed to be during the period of the railroads being built, which is why they would explain there was so many Chinese people around, you know. So a lot of Chinese and Irish and stuff like that helped build the railroads in America, immigrants coming over. So I think that's where the original story was set. Yeah, that would be. I'd love to actually see that, to be honest. I think that'd be really good.
So if they do make a remake, which I kind of hope they don't,
you could do some kind of
maybe
prequel.
They could do that. That would be pretty awesome.
Because no doubt Lopan was still around at that point.
Exactly, it's like 2,000 years old.
And I think also the Western vibe is reflected in some certain characters. You know, you've got Gerald Okamura, who's just the wee baldy guy in the fights. Who's got you see him, he's a B or C list actor that you see every now and again in action films and stuff. I think he was in Samurai Cop, funnily enough, and he got a bigger part in that. But you know, he was never one of these actors that you were going to see on massive projects. But you know, he's one of these ones for the sort of cult film aficionados like myself. You're going to see him everywhere. Him and Al Leong were two of the main characters, and Jeff Imada as well, maybe. But they were part of the Wing Kongs and the set of Chan Signs. But yeah, Gerald Okamura is
the goodies and the baddies. If you've not seen it.
But yeah, Gerald Okamura is the one with the bald head that's got the 6 shooters, the 2 golden guns, and he's also got the bullet belts crossed across his body.
Yeah, he's got that kind of like bandito kind of look about
exactly.
him.
He's got the bandit vibe, and he's the one that sort of fires the first shot as well. You know, he's like waiting to go for his guns. It's just hilarious. So you've got a little bit of that in there as well that sort of adds to that Western flavour. But on a technical level, I think one of the most impressive parts of the film is the martial arts choreography. And again, we talked about how John Carpenter hired actual masters and martial artists.
And a lot of them.
Yeah. I mean, like Jeff Imada is a name that you see quite a lot, especially in the 80s and 90s. And he was on there doing a lot of work for this as well. But yeah, there was a lot of other Chinese kung fu masters, and you can really tell. But what's also important is they know how to shoot the action. You know, there's a very specific way in the Hong Kong films that they like to lock off the camera and sort of see everything from a distance. They just allow the actors to sort of move around the scene, and they only change at certain points. It's usually just a wide angle to let you see what's going on. Occasionally they do the close-ups to show like in close hand action. I know, but it never really sort of cuts away. It always just sort of focuses in one part at a time.
Yeah, and it really shows up the skill of the artist,
Well,
rather
that's
than
it.
clever cuts to hide punches and things like that. It's a real celebration of those styles.
That's exactly the point. In the West, they're more scared of showing the kind of the strings that we're not really punching this person, and maybe the technique is not very good on this kick, so they change angles, and you get that, and then maybe the stuntmen aren't as confident in getting really close, or in some cases even hitting each other, because again, in a lot of the Hong Kong movies, they actually strike each other to make it look realistic, and you can't get any more realistic than that when you actually see the impact on someone's head or someone's face or whatever. But yeah, I think in this film there's clever use of dummies. You see a lot of close-up shots where the guys will actually kick or punch,
like break arms and things
break
like
arms
that.
and legs. It's just dummies. I mean, that it's not a real person, but
it makes it really, really fun to watch.
It makes it fun to watch, and it also makes it feel a bit more realistic and live, and not so like if it was cutting too much, that scene would be pretty bad.
Yeah, definitely.
Don't get me wrong.
Super cheesy.
I think he is genuinely just going with what maybe the second unit director would say, like this is how we should probably shoot this, because they're experts in how best to capture that action, where to capture it from, and all those kind of things. So that's one of the great things about Carpenter. You can tell that if someone knows something he doesn't, he's quite happy to use that information and not get egotistical about it. I think the problem comes, like we said earlier, when studios are trying to tell him how to do his job, and it's the same problem.
They're trying to make a film by committee.
And you've also got a load of Chinese opera style gymnastics. There's lots of somersaults, lots of flips.
You can tell there's like trampolines and shit in there.
And yeah, I love that. I love those techniques as well. And there's a fair bit of wire work as well. What was cool was one of the storms, lightning. When he comes in, he's basically holding onto a wire. The actor's holding onto a wire, but they hide it with this lightning strike.
And it looks great.
It's
like travelling down the lightning. It looks awesome.
He's riding the lightning. For all you Metallica fans out there. But there's some really interesting camera work in it as well. Like, Carpenter's known for creating a lot of the visual language of cinema, especially horror cinema. We talked a little bit about that. But there's some really cool techniques in this, like even down to the wipe. I think there's a circular wipe at one point just when Jack realises what he's gotten himself into. And I just thought that's like the rabbit hole. That's really clever. It's almost like he's going down the hole here, and this got this circular wipe, almost like it's swallowing you up, like you've just fallen into the hole. And I absolutely loved that. But yeah, there's a bunch of cool sort of camera moments in there, and I think once again it's Dean Cundey, like regular Carpenter collaborator, that's sort of catching all these things and showing off his skills again. Like there's that one great moment that reminded me of that Jaws shot where you've got Lopan's floating towards Miao Yin, and Lopan's getting closer and she's kind of getting pulled in, and the camera's following in behind him. You've got this kind of really weird perspective thing going on that kind of shifts, like almost like the background shifts a little bit, because it gives it this kind of otherworldly feel, and obviously it's a ghost moving its way towards this person lying on the table. And Richard Edlund is the man who's taking care of all the special effects in this film, and again, they're really good for the time. The only one that sticks out, the only effect really that sticks out, was again something that Carpenter didn't necessarily want in the film. He didn't want the sort of monster stroke kind of gorilla thing.
I mean, I don't really know what that is.
I mean, I quite like it. You've gone down the rabbit holes we've talked about. Things have been getting progressively weirder and weirder. And the only place it could go is like a monster, essentially, like some kind of beast demon, because you've got men, strong men, mythical men, these characters like the Storms, and Lopan, who can transform between, these two different people.
Forms.
He's actually 3 different forms, isn't he? Because right at the start of the film, when Jack pulls into the alleyway, he's like an old man.
That's right, until he gets run over and pissed off.
Well, he looks like an old beggar, and then he changes into the kind of like the more Chinese...
The classic Lopan
Chinese
look.
Yeah, and then he's obviously got the kind of crazy old Dave in the chair. But yeah, I think you just kind of roll with the monster. Yeah, it's toes and fingers.
It's like
look
a bit
weird, a bit wibbly wobbly.
For me, I think so. The monster then makes an appearance again at the very end of the film when Jack's sort of riding off into the sunset, and then you see a monstery hand.
The rain set.
Into the rain set. You see a wee monstery hand in the
head.
back of the truck. Part of me thinks that it could have been one of the Storms. That might have worked. It didn't need to be the monster. I think Carpenter said the monster was in the script, like it literally said, and then the monster grabs Gracie.
Yeah.
So he kind of had to go with it. And I'm willing to give it a pass.
from the director's perspective, he didn't like it either. So it's not like we're going against director's wishes here. Like, again, I'm all for director-driven stories and the choices that they make, you know, like, even if I don't like it, it's kind of like trying to understand the why. Why did you use it? And, you know, it's very clear he didn't really want to use it, but he shot it. It was mandated, really. So overall, it doesn't really add anything. And people looking in on it nowadays might see that as a really poor thing, you know, to have in there. Like, why did they bother with that? It looks a bit silly, it looks a bit stupid. And for all it does, you know, because as you said, you could quite easily have had one of the storms take
because
Grace.
it's literally there just to pull Gracie back into.
And then at the end, it just pops its head up. And again, that could have been like a
little lightning trigger,
exactly.
like
a lightning
little
infused hand
sparkle
just appears,
just to be like, oh, one of them survived.
Yeah, that would be cool.
And as we know, Carpenter is famous for doing a lot of his own film scores as well.
Is, and he did this one.
Absolutely, and it's another beezer.
It's a belter, yeah. Like, I just love all the Carpenter scores. Again, they're very dated by obviously the sound, the instrumentation, all that kind of thing. Electronics and stuff. But that's a sound that people are constantly trying to replicate.
I love it. I think it's fantastic.
Like nowadays, like, you know, if you like electro and dark wave and synth wave and stuff like that, it's all sort of really Carpenter-esque.
Yeah, for all you Stranger Things fans out there.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Exactly that kind of music.
He's been so influential. And I think it's a lot of people like myself who grew up in that era that are now maybe music producers and things like that, and they're bringing that forward.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's changed. You know, the technology's moved on and it's maybe a bit more sophisticated. But you can't beat some of his scores.
Absolutely.
A lot of them are like super simple, like the fact,
but they're so haunting.
Yeah, but they're just they just fit perfectly for the time. And the actual film that they're they're part of. But yeah, it was him and Alan Howarth, I think, that wrote the majority of the music for this. They were in a band as well, weren't they? So
yeah.
You see that video. Well, you see at the end, you hear the song, but you've got
it's like
that,
an end credit song, and it's the most 80s thing in the entire planet.
You've got the MTV video of it. You should check out. It's just fantastic. John Carpenter singing and playing the bass. I think he's playing. He looks like he's playing a Paul McCartney bass. Thankfully, we got to see John Carpenter in person. We went to Manchester to see him in concert, and he played all his kind of greatest hits from all these movies.
It was such a good show.
It was so good, yeah.
Boo.
And John just boogieing away up there. So yeah, it was fantastic. Yeah, really so glad I got to see it.
Yeah.
So now we're going to move on to our memorable moments. I think there's a few here again, but what do you think? What's your most memorable moment?
So we spoke about the elevator scene, and obviously I said as well that when I think of Big Trouble in Little China, it's always that low pan sequence at the start that springs to mind. Yeah. But for me, the most memorable moments in this are all Jack Burton quotes. You know, or Jack Burton moments, like the moment when he like dives in to save the day with the guns and actually Wang's dealt with it already. Or the bit that has me in stitches every time is when he reaches into his boot to grab his knife and he whips it out and just flings it away. And then, you know, it's just like physical comedy like that. Like it's just, but he does it so well, and he really has entered into that character and really given himself up to that character, and I love it. It's just classic. And the bit as well when everyone's getting away and he's kind of last in line and they've all like crawled through the sewer and stuff and everyone's chatting and getting on with it, and he's like, it's okay, I'm here, and no one cares. They're so good. I'm not selling them very well.
I think the moment where he goes to the door and he's telling them he's telling them the plan, you know, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that, you know.
He's in charge.
He opens the door and you get the gong, and Al Leong and all the Wing Kong are all just standing and looking at him. It's like, shuts the door again, we may be trapped. I think that is just gold.
It's so funny.
I think my favourite, most memorable moment is a toss-up between the entrance of the storms.
Yeah.
Just when you first see them, it's like, who are these guys? This is just the coolest thing ever. And then that scene in the elevator, which, again, like I said, I just almost die every time I watch it. I just think it's so funny. I don't know why, it's just hilarious. It's all, if you look around all of the characters, they're all just got these wee smirks. You can tell they've maybe done this scene before like a few times, and they've just they couldn't stop laughing.
Escalated the more they've done
or,
it. Like.
Or they've said something just before they've started the cameras rolling, you know, there's an undercurrent of sexual tension here or something like that, and they're all just kind of like dying to break.
It's so funny.
And I love the way when the guy James Liu puts his hand on that an eggshells and Jack just like suddenly gets so awkward. I love it to bits.
So just before we go, because I think pretty much this podcast has just been you and I laughing at our favourite Jack Burton quotes. But one more piece of trivia for you.
Yep.
So Kurt Russell actually turned down the role of Connor MacLeod to play this part.
You are shitting.
Can you imagine Highlander with
Jack Burton? Oh my
Jack Burton?
God.
I feel like that would have been a totally different film.
Man.
And I'm glad for
That's
many reasons
fucking
they
insane.
turned it down.
I love Highlander.
I know, right?
We need to do a Highlander podcast
Yeah.
for definite.
Well, there can be only
one.
one.
Well, yeah, damn right, there's only one. There can be only one. But yeah, that's just fucked my head up. That's the best thing ever.
So I'm glad that.
I mean, I love Christophe Lambert. I love Christopher Lambert in Highlander, and wouldn't change him for the world because it's just so silly that this French guy has been Scottish and everything else. But you can cover it by saying that he's lived loads of lives and maybe picked up an accent here and there, except when he was living in Scotland when he still sounded French. But anyway, having Kurt Russell in that role is just mind blowing. Like, what a difference that would have made to that film. My God, that's the best piece of trivia I think I've ever heard.
Thank you. I found it on the internet.
On the interwebs.
So that about wraps it up for our podcast on Big Trouble in Little China.
This was a really good one. I really enjoyed this one. It was a lot of fun. But yes, thank you so much for listening once again. And to everyone who's supported us with downloads and listening along or whatever, wherever you listen to them, that's been really, really appreciated. I think we've got over 100 listens now.
Yeah.
We've done like 4 or 5 episodes. We're not really doing it for the fame and the fortune. We just
Are we not?
No. We just love doing this and just hope people are getting a giggle and a kick out of what we're talking about, and maybe inspire you to watch some of these films or watch it again if you've seen it before, maybe see something different. But yeah, thanks once again for your support, you guys. It's really amazing. We've had some really cool feedback on this. So until next time, you people sit tight, hold the fort, and keep the home fires burning.
If we're not back by next week, call the president.
But not Trump.